It was 13-13, maybe 13-12. It was near the end of my second DE at the October NAC of this season. I made it through my first one all right. That one wasn't a super difficult bout at the time. The second one though, it was close. And I was feeling the pressure. I had made a big change coming to this competition from many competitions in the past. And I was getting ready to see how that adjustment was going to play out. My focus had changed from getting a result or trying to achieve some outcome to truly enjoying the process. Now, it wasn't as simple or as easy as just saying, all right, whatever happens, happens. I'm gonna enjoy myself. Many of you might have had the experience of trying to have that internal conversation and come up against the same wall I came up against many times of being so attached to what happens at the end of the day that enjoying the process regardless wasn't really an option. I had to truly let go of my desire to make the national team, set aside any hopes of going to the Olympics that I had carried with me for over 2 decades, and recognize that whatever I spent or invested money-wise on this trip was for the sake of this trip alone and not any future outcome I could work for. My name is Corwin Duncan. I've been a fencer for 25 years, national competitor for 20 or so. I've been a coach, a referee, now I'm a mental skills coach. And as a younger fencer, I had some wonderful results. I had some terrible results. I had days that felt like everything was going right and I didn't really know why, but I rode that wave, and I had days where it felt like no matter what I did, I could not get my point to land. And at some point I realized that my mental game was my biggest holdup. I was physically in shape, I was technically well trained. I won 3 national championships, I made a couple world championship teams. But somehow the consistency wasn't there. I wasn't able to say, all right, today I'm gonna fence well, and know that I was right. And so I started looking for ways to train my mental game, as many of you might have done. And I heard so often that mental training was important, that I was utterly baffled when I went looking for ways to work on my mental game, and I found nothing. I found no clear, actionable skills that I could use, that I could say, all right, 30 minutes a week, I'm gonna do this, and then my mental state will be better when I compete. Has anybody had that experience? You go looking for a resource, you're like, all right, how do I work on this? And you just don't find a way to do it? See a couple nods. So, what happened that day in October blew me away. I went into that competition without an attachment to an outcome, but I still had a goal. I wanted to make the top 16. As I mentioned, I'd had some good results as a junior. The best of those results at a senior competition was to get top 4. And it had been more than 10 years since I had come anywhere close to that. That day in October, I got there again, I ended up third place, and did the best fencing I've done in more than a decade. Now, it's not as simple, like I said, as saying, all right, I'm gonna let go of the outcomes I won. I'm gonna focus on enjoying this. The hidden piece of that came along with letting go of the pieces that I wanted so badly was being realistic about what I could do to affect the outcome I wanted. There were some things I couldn't change, some things I could not control. And for so many years, I've been focused on those. Any of you gone into a competition and been really focused on something that you actually had no control over? Ranking going in, whether your equipment is working that day, once you've already arrived, already worked on it, already checked it, who your opponent is going to be, whether the referee is making a good call or a bad one. I got very caught up in things that were totally outside of my control and put myself right in the path of immense frustration. This particular competition, I was extremely diligent about the things that I could control. The week leading up, I got a good amount of sleep, took some things off my plate so I wouldn't be stressed. I made a plan for the day before, the day of the competition, what I was going to focus on, how I was going to make sure that I was in a good mindset. The reason I'm going into this is because when I was searching for mental training, I didn't find very much that I could use, but I did find a lot of information. I went to clinics with sports psychologists. I read things online. I heard wisdom from older fencers, highly successful ones, Olympians. And it was all good information. I just didn't know how to use it in a practical way on a day-to-day basis. And I realized that what is important to me in providing mental training is actionable, clear things you can do. So I'd like to share a few pieces around that, what I would call process orientation, being focused on how you are doing instead of what the outcome is, along with a couple other mental skills that I really like and I think are applied to many different situations. So we're going to start off with one that may not seem quite like part of that whole process that got me back to the podium in Div 1, but I'll explain the connection in a couple minutes. It's called 3-minute mindfulness, and I'm going to invite all of you to do this with me right now. Well, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to lead you through it. I guess before I go into that, I should explain what I mean by mindfulness. Because when I ask people, I hear many different definitions. I consider mindfulness to be awareness of the present moment, non-judgmentally. So acknowledging what you're hearing, feeling, seeing, thinking, whatever it may be, without an emotional investment or any need to change. This exercise is called 3-minute mindfulness, so obviously it's a mindfulness exercise and it takes 3 minutes. The first minute, I'm going to ask you to bring your attention to your thoughts, to notice whatever is passing through your mind. The second minute, I'll ask you to focus only on your breath. Now you will become distracted as you try to do this, very frequently, but you can return your attention each time back to your breath. The third minute, you will bring your attention to your body and the physical sensations you're experiencing in this moment. But there's one thing we do first, which is get comfortable, sit up with your back and your neck straight, so that you can sit without moving for 3 minutes. Once you've done that, go ahead, Take a nice deep breath. Close your eyes. And bring your attention to your thoughts. Notice whatever is passing through your mind. You may find your thoughts are racing or moving slowly. You may be noticing thoughts that are lovely and pleasant, or uncomfortable thoughts you'd rather avoid. Whatever you notice, simply observe without any need to change. And move your attention now to your breath. Notice each breath as it comes in, as it goes out. And whenever you find yourself becoming distracted, gently redirect your attention back to the breath. You will always become distracted. And you can always return back to the breath. Whatever is happening around you, within you, you can return your attention to your breath as an anchor. Thoughts will come and thoughts will go, but the breath remains. And now move your attention to your body. Noticing whatever physical sensations you're experiencing. You may feel your clothes on your skin, or the feeling of the chair you're sitting in. You might notice the muscles that are holding you up, or some other sensation. Whatever you notice, observe it without judgment, without any need to change. Simply noticing and accepting it as it is. And with another deep breath, let your eyes come open and come back to the room. So I'm going to turn it over to you all for just a moment and ask, what was it like to do that? What did you notice?
Calming.
Calming. Awesome.
Feeling more centered.
Feeling more centered is it's a big one for me. I like that.
Less clutter.
I'm sorry?
Less clutter. You reduced your inputs.
Less clutter because you're not taking in as much information. Again, that's something I resonate with a lot. Who else felt more calm after doing that? Or while doing it? Who else felt less cluttered? Or more centered? Who thinks those might be helpful at a competition when you're feeling stress and pressure and like there's 1,000 things you have to be paying attention to? What we're practicing here is not just the ability to put our attention on our thoughts or on our breath or on our body, though that can be very helpful at times. We're practicing the more fundamental skill of mindfulness, of non-judgmental observation. It's hard to be distracted by the next bout or worrying about the bad call the referee just made if you're truly focused on your present experience in this moment. And that practice of mindfulness was a huge part of why I was able to step back from my desperate desire for good results, for points, for making the national team that had truly held me back for so many years as a fencer. Any other observations on that experience?
I felt it more kind of just like that I took myself out of whatever conflict I was in before. It was more just kind of watching it happen while still being in control at the same time.
So a little bit of distance from an internal, maybe turmoil that was happening.
Some of what you speak of reminds me of stoicism.
Of stoicism? Yeah.
Did make me aware of what aches.
Yeah.
Me too.
Who wants to be more aware of what aches?
Not so much.
Yeah, not so much, but who wants to have something that is aching while you're fencing, but you don't even realize it? So halfway through your third DE, when you really need to be at the top of your game, then you figure out your leg is about to collapse, or your hand has been cramping up because you're holding the weapon so tight. So we don't want to be more aware of the aches. We don't want to be more aware of, oh, I'm having all these racing thoughts that are full of anxiety. But sometimes we need to know that so that we can step back from it and say, okay, my hand is not my strength at the moment. I better use a lot of footwork. Who's ever made an adjustment like that, saying, this thing that I normally rely on isn't working so well, so I have to use something different? Who's ever done that? Probably most of you, even if you're not consciously aware of it, if you're fencers. And if you're not a fencer, you've done it in some other way in life, I imagine. The other piece of mindfulness, or the other aspect of it that I like to mention, is it's highly correlated with elite performance. This has been studied. Some of the best athletes, the ones that are best at getting into a state of flow or in the zone, have a high level of mindfulness. And, like everything else I talk about, this is not an abstract concept. It is a skill that you can practice and get better at. Who's ever had the feeling, that guy is just mentally strong, I could never do that? Or, she never lets pressure get to her, she's on a different level? Who's ever had that kind of feeling? I'm an epee fencer, so the people that come to mind for me are Cat Holmes, Jason Pryor, Sam Imrek. Raise your hand if you know those names. Yeah? There are some people who are naturally gifted, in the same way there are some people who are taller or shorter, who are physically stronger, or faster, or for some reason get into a touch that by no rights you should be able to. That's Sam Imrek. But all of us can get better at each of those things, except for height, with practice. So 3-minute mindfulness is a phenomenal exercise. I highly recommend it. That's how I start all of my one-on-one mental coaching sessions. Because along with the long-term benefits, in the moment, it helps you get more focused, less cluttered. Now there's another skill I want to share with you right now, and this is, again, one that is valuable to practice, but it's especially useful at those moments of overwhelm. 14-14. Referee just made a bad call. You're getting up to fence your first DE ever at a national competition, World Cup, World Championships. I call it a 5-second reset. I didn't create this exercise, I just renamed it. I don't know if there's a name for it besides that. And it goes like this. You're gonna breathe in again, and breathe out. Breathe out all the way. I'm gonna say breathe in through your nose twice and out through your mouth. We're gonna do that 10 times. You might only use it once, maybe twice at a competition, but we're practicing it, right? So we're gonna practice it more than once. So, go ahead, breathe in, Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. 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 Breathe in. Breathe out. Relax, breathe normally. What do you notice after that?
Tired.
Tired? Who else feels more tired?
Heart rate is up slightly.
Heart rate went up a little bit.
I feel like you're focusing on the exercise and it's interrupting the thought patterns.
Who else didn't notice a lot of other thoughts as they were really controlling that breathing pattern? It's almost like noticing an absence you might not realize at first. But yeah, when you really focus on your breath and change it, right? This isn't mindfulness at this point, you're changing something about your breathing and your breathing pattern. That takes up your focus. And it's a lot harder to be as distracted by the, oh no, you have to win, or you can't win, there's no way you can win, or any of these other distressing thoughts we may have. Besides the fact that it causes you to mentally focus on the breathing, I call that a reset because it helps to physiologically take your body out of a fight or flight state, that adrenaline-fueled, slightly overwhelming state of high activation. We need some adrenaline defense, right? We can't be falling asleep on the floor. We can't be so high that we lose mental control and stability. So this kind of reset can help when we're going through one of those spikes to bring us down just a little bit into a more manageable level. Who's ever noticed one of those spikes, one of those moments, maybe at 14:14 in priority? That's an epee thing for Eusebius, epee and foil. Who's ever had that moment of kind of panic and this intense freeze, or I don't know what to do next? I've definitely had it. And if you've competed, you've probably had it at some point. So this is to handle that spike and to round out that curve a little bit, to keep it more manageable. So back to the idea of being focused on the process. Because as I said, I want to tell you how you can, not just the idea behind it. And it's not as simple as saying, all right, I'm not going to worry about the outcome. I'm just going to enjoy it. See, similar to what you said relates to Stoicism. Being oriented towards the process is about focusing on what you can control. And we often mix up the things we can control for the things we can't. We mix up what I would call the action and the outcome. I would say once you've started fencing, whatever happens is the outcome of your preparation. Yeah, you have some choice, you have some ability to change the outcome there, but it really comes from whether you've prepared effectively. When I say what's in your control, I don't mean, okay, I'm going to focus. If I asked you to focus on something, you could try, but if I bet you $1 million that you'd stay focused on it, you might not take that bet. If I bet you $1 million that you can go to bed at 10 p.m. the night before the competition, you can make sure of that. You might have to rearrange some things, get an earlier flight, but you could guarantee that you get into bed at 10. You might not sleep well. That's out of your control. But you can influence it by when you go to bed and what you do before you go to sleep that night. So, the first step in this process is you identify what you can control. What are the things that are fully within your power, or that you can realistically say, I will make sure this happens? Finding a cup of coffee in a new city? Absolutely. Finding a good cup of coffee in a new city? Not necessarily. So be clear on what you can control and what is not within your power, but you can influence, and what is fully outside of your power. And this changes over the course of your preparation and competition. Before you go, you can control if your equipment is working and in order and well packed. The morning of the competition, whatever you packed or didn't pack, whatever's working or not working, that's the way it is. And that is now outside of your control, and you just have to deal with it. The second thing is to decide what to focus on, as in what you think will actually help you. There might be 1,000 things you can control the week leading up to a competition, but you can't control all 1,000 of them in the same week. I used to fall into the trap, an embarrassing amount of saying, okay, there's a week left until my competition, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. I'm going to train 6 days, I'm going to do 3 days of recovery, I'm going to sleep at 9 p.m. every night. And then I would lead myself into this incredible amount of stress because I was trying to do all these things that I couldn't fit into 1 week. And I started saying, okay, it's a week before my competition. What's the one thing that will help my performance the most? Oh, it's actually not training more. Maybe I go, take 1 lesson, fence a few bouts. The most important thing is getting enough sleep and making sure I don't have an overwhelming amount of stuff on my calendar. Anybody else gone into a competition with a few too many things weighing on your mind? And it wasn't that you were necessarily distracted by them, but you just didn't have that mental space and relaxation. Anybody done that? Competition, a presentation, anything else you felt was important? Now, I didn't notice this as much when I was a junior. And something that helped me as a junior was that I was going to competitions all the time. So it was almost easier to develop a routine, a pattern, a habit of, I do this and this and this, and I know it's going to be all right, it's going to work out. But I didn't do it consciously. And that did not help me because when I missed something, I wasn't aware of what I missed or how much it hurt me. See, my working definition for mental skills training that I didn't even have when I was looking for mental skills training in the past. And I think this is very important, is anything that helps your performance, anything that helps your mental state to be in the best state for you to perform well. So, sleeping well the night before is part of your mental training. Making sure you have your favorite weapon, because that weapon makes you fence better, whether it's true or not, might be part of your mental training. Having a conversation with your mom or dad beforehand saying, thank you so much for your support. If you could step 10 feet away from the strip or maybe go into a different room while I'm fencing, that would be even better. Might be part of your mental training. And if you can be diligent about each one of these things you can control and that you know help you, you might see amazing results from that. Now, You don't always know what's going to help you. As an athlete, you have a sense, you have an intuition. And I encourage you to move towards those intuitions. But it's still important to treat it as an experimentation process. Hey, if I do this, does it help me or not? If I do that 3-minute mindfulness thing, is it going to be good for me? Is it going to help me focus? Oh, actually, it calmed me down a little bit too much. Maybe I need to do a shorter version. I just do 20 seconds instead of a whole minute for each thing. Okay, I need to drink more water. Actually, I was drinking enough water. That's not an issue for me. Okay, I need to eat during the break. Yeah, that was a big problem. Now I'm going to need to ease with energy. That was a problem for me. So figure out what you can control. Decide on the things that you're going to focus on. And then this is a very important and subtle step that will take practice. You focus on those things more than the result of the competition. Who has ever left a competition feeling like it was awful from start to finish? Yeah, we've all had those days. And a lot of times what I've realized is many of the controllables were as good as they could be. I just really didn't like how that turned out. And sometimes I felt like the competition was awful. The competition was fine. I just didn't like the bit at the end where I lost. When I went back and thought, if I could change anything I wanted to about that competition, as much as I wanted to, what are the things I would change? Would I warm up different? No, my warm-up was good. Would I get to the venue earlier? No, I got there at a good time. Would I eat different? No, what I ate was fine. Would I fence pools differently? Well, yeah, I lost 2 pool bouts. Those 2 bouts, I would have done something different. I don't know what. What about during the break? No, I ate. That was good. Warm up for D's, that was good. What about my D? Well, I mostly approached it right, but those 2 touches at the end where it was 13-13 and then I lost 15-13. I would change those 2 touches. That's such a small amount of the day. I did most of everything I wanted to right, and even looking back, I think it was right. It just led to an outcome I didn't like. And the outcome is not within our control. Only the process. The other subtle mental shift that I found extremely important was to let go of the urgency. And again, this will take practice. This is not something you can do from one day to the next. Or if you can, amazing. Good for you. I couldn't. It is to not say, I have to get a good result at this competition. This is my only chance. This is my shot. I have to impress a college coach. I have to make it on the junior team. I have to get top 8 so my coach is proud of me, or so my peers think I'm a good fencer. They do or they don't. That top 8 will make a difference, but it's not that important. I tried for 6, 7 years to get a result at this competition to make sure this year I did well. And it never worked until I stepped back and said, you know what? Every competition now is just, let's see what happens. I'm going to do my best and accept the outcome. Immediately, I got a medal. I'm not promising it will happen that quickly. But you will notice a difference in the way that you go through the entire competition if you're able to make that mental shift of non-urgency. Some of you I see in this room are young enough that you're going to have many years of competition. Some of you will have many years still in juniors. Even a few years more maybe in cadets. So you got one of 2 possibilities. Either you have many years of competition ahead of you, or if you don't have many years of competition ahead of you, then you've got other things to worry about besides your results. Either way, don't worry about this competition. Don't worry about what you're putting into it right now. Let it be part of the bigger picture. Step back. Observe what's happening without any judgment, without any effort to change the things you cannot change. And if that sounds like something else I said earlier today, that sounds like mindfulness, there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why that's such an important skill to practice. So, to review, the steps that I said to be focused on the process. And this, I would say, is a hugely important part of taking the skill and relaxed fencing and beautiful touches you get in practice and translating them to competitions. Who's ever had that difficulty? Practice is good, competitions, not so much. Have that happen? Yeah. Is letting the process be the outcome. So first, identify what's within your control, what's not. This will take practice. Start, see what happens. Do it well, do it badly, does not matter. You're just getting some practice in. Figure out what you can control. Second, decide either what you think is going to help you or what you're going to try on this particular occasion. Again, doesn't matter too much if you're right or wrong. You're practicing. Is this national championships? Your first one ever? Your last one ever? Doesn't matter. You're still practicing. You're experimenting. You got many more years of life to apply these concepts to fencing and to everything else you're doing. Third step, make those parts of the process that you've identified the utmost priority. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean your desire to get a good result is just going to drop away, right? Normally, our desire to get a good result is up here and our focus on the process is down here. If we really emphasize this, sometimes we can bring them to about even. If we work really hard, we can get the process a tiny bit above. Don't have any fear. This part, your desire for results isn't going away. You're an athlete in a competitive sport. You're going to want to win. Just let that be how it is. Put your conscious focus on the process. And then, try to let go of any urgency around that desire to win. It might be today, might be next week, might be next year, might be next lifetime if you believe in reincarnation. Whatever it is, let it come when it comes. And be aware that that will take practice to incorporate that mindset. That's what I had to share with you today. I will be here for any questions you may have. And I would love to tell you more about what I offer in terms of one-on-one mental skills coaching over Zoom. But thank you so much for being here with me, for practicing a few skills, and for listening to what I had to say.
Do you recommend any particular resources, like books or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a book named called Choke. C-H-O-K-E. The author's name is, I don't know how to say it, it's S-I-A-N B-E-I-H-L-O-C-K, I believe. And it's about handling high pressure situations. There's also the book One Touch at a Time by Aladar Kobler, which is a perfect example of what I would call difficult to access information, in that I'm sure it's a great book, but I have trouble making it through the first chapter because it's written by a PhD who I think has forgotten that people who are not PhDs will be reading it. And then there's, of course, the checklist I put together for pre-competition mornings. I call it the Perform Perfect Checklist, which you will see if you look at all the questions on it. You will understand why if you look at all the questions on it. And the essence of that is that it asks you, did you prepare well? Do you feel good? Do you feel confident? Things like that. And you don't have to say yes. You just have to honestly acknowledge, do I or don't I? Where am I today? Realistically, where am I at? Is my hand actually feeling good? Can I take parries? Or do I need to focus on footwork? That kind of thing. And you can get that by signing up for my email list on my website, which is SharperMindTraining.com. Any other questions? Or what other questions are there? I'm sure, yeah.
Did you prepare that plug?
A lot of what I say is off the cuff, so not exactly, but I knew I was going to plug it somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there
Thank
any
you.
specific affirmations, or do you use affirmations?
I think affirmations are fantastic. I think it's important to understand what you mean by affirmation. So there's a couple different ways you could use that. Do you have a definition for that, or a way that you would
Just sort
describe
of
it?
like anything you repeat to yourself before maybe you move out or something like that, or
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically I would say there's two categories of affirmations. There's aspirational ones, where you can say, this is what I want to believe, so I'm going to repeat it until I believe it. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. The other is evidence-based, where you can say, for example, I'm well prepared for this competition. Because I spent the last 2 weeks at camp, and I'm definitely prepared for this competition. And that is saying, based on this real world evidence, this fact that I can point to, I can say something that I will now believe. I know I can beat this person, because I've already beaten this person. I know I can fence well, because last competition I fenced great. Does that mean I'm going to today? Who knows? But I certainly have the ability to. What else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it important to understand or to interpret exactly what you're feeling? Something like I'm scared, or I fight as a challenge, or something like that before playing? Does it can may not be good before playing? Or is it important to understand what exactly you're feeling?
Yeah, so a little bit in the middle. I don't think it's necessary to know exactly what you're feeling, right? You don't have
Or
to.
after the bout, maybe, understand
After it can be
what
very valuable.
happened during
Yeah.
the bout.
I think it's not essential to know exactly what you're feeling going in, but it's valuable to be able to name it.
Yeah.
And the reason is because when we can say, oh, this feeling I have in my chest of like it's being squeezed, and my body's shaking a little bit, oh, I'm scared. That helps us step back and look at it more mindfully. At the same time, if you're like, I'm feeling so many emotions, there's a lot going on, stuff is running through my head, I don't know what to call it. That's okay. Just call it that. Oh, there's too much going on. That said, after the bout, yeah, it's wonderful to be able to look back and say, okay, going into that bout, oh, I guess I was kind of scared. I didn't want to admit it, but I truly believed I could not possibly beat this person. And maybe next time I'll try saying to myself, instead of, I can beat her, I'll say, maybe I can beat her. And so you can experiment a little bit based on looking back and seeing what happened. Yeah.
I have a question, particularly in the context of national competitions, which are not all competitions.
Yeah.
National competitions run long, because there's a lot of people, right? And we're Sabres, you're Epic, so you live that even more so. And there's this like code that we haven't cracked about like what happens when you're in the first flight of pools.
Mm-hmm.
You do great. Energy's up,
Yeah.
right? Then you're done with pools. Then there's a whole hour, right? And then, okay, there's this question of, okay, yeah, you eat, but what do you eat? And then there's this other period after the second thing of pools, like what, so you've been up, there's a adrenaline spike, there's, great pool, fabulous, high on life, and then there's this trough, and then
Yeah.
how do you get yourself back up to where you were when you were going into the pools with that energy level, with that preparation, because it's not just the physical expenditure, there's some mental ammunition that you put into pools, even if you did well.
100%.
So getting back up, especially against people who are in the second flight, who are up,
They're coming off of a strong pool, absolutely.
sometimes can be really hard, where it's like someone's coming in hot, you've been, down there, and like, how do you do that?
Yeah, this is a great question. And to kind of restate it, how do you manage your mental state through a break in the competition? Whether it's after the first flight of pools, or after you warm up and then find out you're in the second flight of pools, or you fence really well in pools and then you get a bye, and the competition takes forever to get going again. The very short answer is you experiment. And I'll tell you an example of myself experimenting and doing it not quite the best way. Last December, I went to my first World Cup in a while, and I had a solid pool, and I felt good. I really focused on my preparation. So I said, what do I do now? And it was flighting. So I knew I had to wait. So I was like, okay, relax completely, and then warm up again fully. Because the other piece of it is you're going from this high focus state, and you want to end up in this high focus state. You don't want to try to stay here the whole time, you'll become exhausted. And you don't want to get so low that you can't get back up, right? So you want to find a middle ground and sort of observe that curve so you can bring it back to the peak where you want to be in this nebulous 1 to 3 hours from now time period. And so what I did was I ended up warming up too much. And by the time I got to my DE, I was just a little bit too tired. And when you're fencing at a World Cup, you can't be just a little bit too tired. You have to be right on point. So I ended up losing that bout. It was a close one, right? It was, if I was a little bit better, I could have won it. So it's disappointing. So part of it is experience, learning yourself. How do you manage that progression of energy, right? Part of it is realizing you don't want to try to stay at that peak that whole time. You do want to relax. And finding, how do I relax without taking myself out of the competition? I'll tell you some things that do not work for me. Looking at my phone, reading a novel, playing a game that's too engaging, talking to people. All those things don't exist for me at competitions. Things that might work a little bit better, doing like not super difficult puzzles, staring off into space and listening to music, walking around and watching other fencers, but not really caring about how they do. So not your best friend. Things like that keep me a little bit active, a little bit engaged, but still let me mentally rest. The other piece of it is finding a way to start to come back up. What I would recommend is the same exact warm-up use at the beginning of the day, but maybe everything is half, right? So to warm up at the beginning of the day, I run up and down the strip 8 times, I sprint twice, I do some other things. Maybe before DEs, I do that 4 times instead of 8, and so on. So you do that, you do a little bit of your warm-up bouts, and you find a way, and this is a subtler, tricky thing, but it's also very tricky, to stay in I can stay here or I can get more warmed up when I know I'm going to be the next bout. And that is, again, a tricky mental state to maintain, but with practice and with time and with experience, it is possible. But sometimes it does take a number of repetitions to get that in place. Yeah.
So some of the tournaments are Saturday morning, 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the kids cannot miss the school, so they have to fly out late.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest for the kids to prepare, arriving the night before, then 8 a.m. the next day?
Yeah.
Is there a way, besides getting enough sleep, is there a way to prepare them mentally?
So the most important for sleep is actually the night before the night before. So 2 nights before the competition, make sure you get all the rest you need. If possible, the whole week. If it's absolutely impossible to get into the competition at a time that lets you get really a good amount of sleep, then really focus on leading up to that, and then focus on all of the other factors that you can control. Now, don't focus on them to the point they become stressful. Focus on them to the extent that you can comfortably manage them. So, an example of that might be to say, all right, I know we're getting in at 9 p.m. to the airport, which is not ideal, right? Because then you have to get dinner, then you have to whatever, get to the hotel. Fencing at 8 a.m. So before I go, I'm gonna find a restaurant that I know is open, so we don't have to stop and think, where are we gonna go next? Get into the airport, go straight to the restaurant, go straight to the hotel. Eliminate anything you don't have to do. You're not checking your weapons that night because it's too late. So plan out your time ahead so it's as streamlined as possible. And then also, I recommend, and this is something I do with all of my clients, make a plan for the day of the competition. So you know where your focus is gonna go for each period, how you want your energy to be, where you wanna put your energy, and eliminate the need to make decisions on a moment-by-moment basis. But if at all possible, get there earlier so you can sleep. Yeah.
Something very similar to what he had asked. What should an athlete, a fencer, do the day before and the evening before the competition? So your mind might be.
Number one thing I would say is not have a hugely intense, stressful, obnoxious day that is awful and leaves you with some sort of mental hangover the next day, right? Which isn't mostly gonna happen. But it's the kind of thing that if you have something that you know is gonna be difficult that day, try to not plan another difficult thing that day as well. If you have to travel for a bunch of hours, do your best to make it comfortable and pleasant. It doesn't have to be you're riding on a cloud the whole time. Just don't make your life more difficult than it needs to be. Besides that, experience. Figure out what works for you. The other thing I love to say about mental training that I have not yet mentioned is it is very individual. And this is why experience is such a huge factor. What works for you might be different from what works for me, might be different from what works for Jason Pryor, 2016 Olympian, or anybody else. Some people might do the exercises that I just gave and say, great, now I'm in a perfect mental state. Other people might do them and say, now I'm ready to fall asleep. And you need something to bring you up too sometimes. So find out what is best for you. I need to be, have a plan and follow it, but I cannot be too focused on that plan or it becomes its own stressor. For me personally, I'm pretty much always flying the day before a competition. I should make a distinction. We're here at nationals. If you're trying to make a national team, anything that doesn't give you national points is a practice competition. You're just there to see what it's like to go through a competition or to fence an extra day. If you're trying to make it to nationals, regionals are important. If you're trying to make it to a higher place in the world ranking, national competitions matter because you got to keep being qualified for the worlds. but World Cups are really the competitions that are important for you. So make a distinction of what's really an important competition for you. And that's where you put your most important focus. So for me, a competition means I'm flying. There's no national competitions, there's no World Cups in New York. So I'm always flying somewhere. So the day before, pretty much I'm flying, and I need to just manage that travel day. So a lot of it is just kind of planning ahead. Again, you'll have an intuition as an athlete. You'll say, what actually will help me? Playing video games for 4 hours? Oh, probably not. That might not, I might want to do that, but that's not going to help me. Okay, so doing all my homework? No, also not going to help. And I got to find a balance. Be a little bit relaxed, be a little bit focused. I know that was a super big non-answer, but I hope it gave you a little bit to work with. We have another 5 minutes. One more question? All right, that's everything. Again, thank you so much for coming. I'll see you all later.